Hello, listeners, and welcome to Beyond the Mirror. This isn't just another podcast, it's a deep dive into the world of beauty, wellness, and longevity. Now, we're here to discuss what beauty really means beyond just appearances. We'll also talk about wellness, the habits and practices that keep us healthy, full of energy, and we'll explore the topic of longevity, looking at the science and realities of living a long, fulfilling life. So sit back, relax, and join us as we go beyond the mirror.
Hello, and welcome back to Beyond the Mirror. Today we have an amazing topic. We're talking about financial health and how that, via stress and other lifestyle issues, can affect your wellness and longevity. And today I have an amazing guest, Heidi Ricken Provost from Ricken Financial. And we're excited to have her here to talk about how to look at your finances and how those decisions can affect your wellness and longevity. And Heidi and her group also have a podcast called Kickin' with the Rickens. So if you love what she has to say, definitely go check them out as well and continue learning about your finances because that's pretty important stuff.
Absolutely.
So welcome to the show, Heidi.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
And why don't we start with you giving me a little background on how did you end up in this industry and how did it become a passion of yours and why you want to talk about this?
Absolutely. And so the funny question, that's a funny question because I got started in this industry for one reason, and that is nepotism. I work with my dad, and when I was in college, he needed a little help around the office. And he's like, hey, can you just come in and help me out? And my first response was, sure, but I'm never going to work with you. And he was like, what do you mean you're never going to work with me? I'm like, I just don't know if this is my passion. And quite honestly, I had no clue what he was even doing. And within about 6 months, I ate crow and was like, okay, this is awesome because you actually get to make a difference in people's lives. One of my degrees is in psychology, and I thought I was going to go be a grief counselor in the future. And now I kind of am because I'm there when people merge households, when they separate households, when, you lose a family member, you gain kids, all these different arenas. And I absolutely love it. So I've been with my dad in business for about 15 years or so. And in the last 5 years, I became a partner with him as well and actually have some skin in the game now. And I'm an advisor. So I can help people manage money in and out of the market. We take a look at things like, your life insurance. Do you have the right coverage there? Long-term care. How are you covered there? Can we help you create a legacy? Do you have all your beneficiaries structured properly? What's your income stream going to look like in the future? Can you maximize Social Security? Really, it's all encompassing. We take a look at pretty much everything and design plans specifically for each person who comes through the door. And I think we have a cool little sweet spot because not only are we a father-daughter group, but I'm a female in an industry that's male dominated. And I get to spend a lot of time empowering women to make their own financial decisions. So I don't know, it's really cool. It definitely feeds my soul. I fought it for a little bit of time. But I'm all in and I absolutely love what I do on a daily basis. And my favorite part of my job is getting to meet people and helping them, without any form of judgment, make the financial decisions they need to be making to meet their goals.
Yeah, that's huge. When you're talking about psychology, we always joke as estheticians that we are part-time counselors as well.
Jamie knows that when she does my eyebrows.
Yeah. So we definitely have that, connection. And like I have clients, for example, that I have now been working on for 18 years.
Wow.
And we have a real intimate relationship and they can tell me things that they can't tell their friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it's a little scarier, with you, and you have to break them in a little bit. But I'm sure once you've garnered their trust, then it is good to have someone that you can have the raw financial conversations with.
Oh, absolutely.
Because again, there's so much that you're not going to tell your mom or whatever. I mean, maybe you would, but because you guys are working together.
Well,
but,
I probably wouldn't talk to my mom about it, but maybe my dad.
Yeah. But, like,
exactly.
There's just a lot of.
But even my friends, like when we have quite a few clients actually who know us personally outside of our industry, but even more so that don't, because it's uncomfortable. I liken it to, like, especially when people come in through our tax practice, because we do income tax preparation for our clients as well. So think about coming in front of someone and laying your entire financial data on the table. I liken it to like getting naked in front of your doctor the first time. I mean, it's raw, it's tough, and it can cripple you even thinking about having to go through that if you've never been through something like that before, because the fear of the unknown is what holds us back from doing a lot of things in our lives. And if you have to be that transparent with someone, sometimes it's hard to do that when we're not even transparent with ourselves. Like I said, I've been here for about 15 years, and I didn't even go through this whole process myself until about 5 years ago, because for 10 years I was terrified to actually put boots on the ground and do my own work, but I'm like, okay, I have to practice what I preach before I can put this in action.
Well, it just gives you a different level of legitimacy.
Oh yeah.
When you can relate to what someone is going through. And so, like, we really want to talk about, like, the big thing we want to talk about is, if you're trying to live a longer life, a life of wellness and longevity, which is, a big theme of the podcast, then you've got to look at your finances.
Oh, absolutely.
It's critical.
Oh yeah.
So maybe if you can talk about financial stress, and I think the biggest thing is, the procrastinating, do nothing. I mean, if you're doing nothing at almost any age, you're just creating more stress for your future.
Oh, and the stress compounds on top of each other over time. It's that snowball effect, and it'll turn into an avalanche if you don't deal with it. But I don't want to discount how stressful it is to get started, because that's the hardest point, honestly, is just finding someone that you know, like, and trust, and getting started with them. But once you do that, you will relieve so much stress in the future. I mean, I'm someone that is not immune to cortisol. We all have, that stress hormone in our body, and I had quite a bit of it. And I think taking care of my financial wellness while I was also on a healthcare journey definitely coincides, because I had so much underlying stress just thinking about, I didn't even have a plan in place for a budget. How am I going to pay this bill? And each month I would look at my bank account and be like, well, how do I do this? And should I have an escrow account for some of my ongoing expenses? And there were just so many unknowns that I didn't realize how crippling it actually was until I took control of it. And I realized on a daily basis, I don't wake up feeling like I'm walking through quicksand and freaking out about how I am going to, take care of my financial future, because there's a plan in place and all you have to do is execute the plan. I mean, it's no different from everything else we do in our life, but I definitely think that it'll reduce your stress for the future, because if you can have a plan in place when you have the wealth of time, and you can take the time and make the time to do it, and you don't have any, avalanche coming at you, it's a lot easier than if you let it go for years and years and years. And then, the 62-year-olds that come to see me and they want to retire in 3 years and they've never had a plan in place. I mean, it's pretty difficult then. Or if you need long-term care, by the time you come and you ask someone for some form of coverage, you're not going to be able to actually have the coverage that you should have had or deserved to have in your working years,
Right. My son is very financially focused. He's a very driven kid. He's only 18, but, like, I think a year and a half ago, he was learning some of the who's the religious financial guru? Why can't I think of his name right now?
Dave Ramsey.
Yeah. So he was reading a Dave Ramsey book at 16, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to start now. And so he opened a 401k at 16 years old.
That's amazing.
And he's putting $100 a month in it, and he budgets for it. And, He knows it's coming and he has a job so he can pay for it. And like, it's crazy. But he kept saying, Mom, like they told me that your money could double every 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like doing the math on that, going, if I just took a little chunk, that makes such a huge difference. And that is true at any age.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you can start young, like your son. We call it the $1 million cup of coffee. Okay, if I want to go buy a cup of coffee, even at a cheap place, and by cheap, I mean, I'm like, please, there's nothing against Quick Trip coffee, but I'm not going to go buy that. It's like what, $4 a cup for a cheap cup of coffee. If you do that every day from age 18 to 65, the difference in buying a cup of coffee every day versus taking that $4 and investing it, by the time you hit age 65, that's $1 million that you could have invested.
And that's a nothing. That's a nothing number.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
The average person.
I mean, think about how many point and click purchases we make every day that are $4.
Yeah.
I'm not immune to that, believe me. And that's why I say it really is no judgment. We're all human beings. We're all going to make mistakes along the way, but it's how we handle those so that we can prepare for the future so that you can have the successes that you want. That really makes the difference.
Yeah, that planning in general is so critical. Like, one of the things when my husband and I were originally building our individual businesses was, having insurance and life insurance in place to protect those businesses, and thinking that you have to think about, like, it isn't just, okay, you got an investor, you got money, and now you're going to launch this thing and you go off into the stratosphere. You need to think about, how are you protecting yourself? And there's like so many elements of financial planning, even having a will.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And making sure, if you're over the age of 18, it doesn't matter if you're married, single, whatever, you need to have someone in your life designated as your medical power of attorney and financial, because you know what? I could get hit by a bus today. And if I'm incapacitated or I have a stroke or whatever the situation is, I want to make sure that the courts are not in charge of what's going to happen to my money and my health. And if you don't have that in place, it's pretty darn easy. All you got to do is find someone to notarize a piece of paper for you. But, make sure that you have it in case of emergency set up and that you have your medical power of attorney, because, that's also going to reduce a lot of stress, because by the time you get to the point in time that you would need that, it's already too late to put it in place when you need it.
When someone thinks of financial planning, or someone, I'll say I'm a lay person thinking of financial planning, you immediately think of maybe stocks and investment and 401ks and things. But it really is an all, like you were mentioning, budget.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are putting those elements in place, like, here's a budget, we have a plan, here's how you're going to invest, here's a plan. Oh, look, here's your life insurance. There's a plan. The other thing is, I don't think you have to go in and just be like, I need all the things.
Oh, yeah. No.
I mean, you can baby step anything in.
Absolutely. And, my dad has always said this my entire life. Whenever I felt like there was just something so huge, I didn't know how to tackle it, he would say, Heidi, the only way to eat an elephant is bite by bite. It's one bite at a time. Like, I'm never going to force anyone into a conversation where we're changing your entire life overnight, because that actually is going to cause more stress on you. But we baby step it, start with some form of budget. And if you don't have any budget in place, what I typically do is take a look at how much you're taking home in your take home pay. About 50% of that should go to your needs. About 20% should go to long-term savings of some sort. And you should build emergency funds first that are going to cover at least 6 months of those needs. And then, set aside money for the future. So that could be in the form of, IRAs, 401ks. There are life insurance plans you can actually fund that have some living benefits that give you tax-free income in the future, kind of like having your own bank account, investments, whatnot. And then that extra 30%, that's your fun money. So, the 50% of your paycheck is going to cover your needs, and that 30% is going to cover your wants, so you can play a little bit. So I call that my play check, because everyone deserves to have a play check when you're working, and when you're retired.
I do think too that a lot of people, when they think budget, they don't think of that.
No.
But that's critical.
Oh yeah.
Like when we were doing our budget, are you putting your clothing? Like, you're going to have to buy clothing.
Yeah.
You're going to have to buy shoes. you're going to get your hair colored or whatever. And, so that has to be a piece of what you're actually planning. You're not going to just say, here's 100%, and we're going to put this all towards the required financial stuff. And now there's nothing left, because no one's going to follow that.
Oh my gosh, no. I mean, it's the same as a diet. And believe me, I am not immune to dieting. I'm 34 years old. And when I was 32, I had weight loss surgery, and I spent 32 years prior to that on different diets. If anyone ever gave me something super strict where you could never touch sugar again in your life, or, whatever, you're not going to hold to it. But it's a lifestyle change. And when you make those small little tweaks, it doesn't feel so big anymore. And all you really have to do is change your mindset, and it literally it'll take the weight off of your shoulders and make you feel so much better, whether it's, literally your health plan or your financial plan, which ties into your physical health too. Because if your mental health is hurting, whether it's, from any form of actual mental illness or it's from financial stress, you're not going to have a very beneficial health journey until you take care of that.
Yeah. I mean, even as a business owner, there are moments sometimes when I'm like, oh my goodness, the level of stress I'm experiencing in this moment. I'm like, this is so bad for me. How can I alleviate that? Or what can I do to, take that burden off for a second? Or so, it's the same with your financial health. You've got to have a solution, have a plan, have a way to overcome the things that are overwhelming you. And if you have a plan, you're not going to have as many things that are overwhelming you. And so that leads to, like me, I know that one of your passions is educating women on their finances. And you gave me some statistics which were super interesting before the show. Maybe you can share some of that.
Oh, absolutely. So I was sharing that out of our current clients right now, about 60 to 70% of them are single females. And I think it's because multiple reasons. But me as a woman, I find it a lot easier to have tough, raw, emotional conversations with a woman who's going to get it. So it might make some sense, since I'm in the room, that, a lot of that happens. But a lot of the single female clients that I work with didn't really have a good basis of understanding or knowledge prior to meeting with me. And my whole focus is education first. So I want to make sure that you're empowered to make these decisions, because they're not my decisions to make. It's whatever your goals are, what your risk tolerance is, what kind of reward you want for the future, and I help you meet that. But, we start with a basis of education and build upon that. And then out of about the 30% or so of my clients who are married, most of those women, I would say, honestly, when I take a look at it, there's probably 2 female clients I can think of who are married that actually know what's happening and knew what was happening prior to meeting with us. But most of them are just like, oh, my partner takes care of all of that and I don't even have to worry about it. Well, what if they get hit by that bus? What are you going to do then? How are you going to be empowered for your financial future when you don't even have a basis of understanding or knowledge? And at that point in time, think about how much stress you're under if, God forbid, you would have to bury your partner and then you have to start from the ground up and you don't even know where to begin. I can't even imagine how crippling that would have to be. So,
I mean, even not knowing where things are, even the most basics as to, okay, yes, I'm sure you can log into your accounts and there's ways to do that. But do you know all of them? Like when we were doing our life plan / will, it was shocking to me, how many elements of finances that we knew about, but maybe I didn't know something that my husband had going on, and he didn't know I had this savings account over. And it wasn't that we were hiding anything. It was just more like we've kind of lived, he's my second marriage. So we've lived more independently financially.
Yeah.
And so we just don't harp on each other that much. And I don't know the nuances of every penny that he has. And that's fine.
Well, I was even just meeting with a married couple last week who have been together forever, and they thought they knew everything about their own finances. And we were looking through tax forms, and she had a tax form and had no clue what it even meant. We looked at it. She had an old 401k from a previous job when she was in her 20s. She's in her 60s now. And it had gotten moved because it was too small to be held at her old employer. And she was like, I didn't even know I had that money. So, until you kind of peel back the layers and look at that, a lot of people have no clue what they even have or what their basis for starting is. And that's why I always make you do a little bit of homework when I get started with anyone, because you have to have a good foundation to build upon. But I mean, it's like your health too. If you've never gone to see a primary care, or you have no one who's taking care of your health, how are you supposed to go see a specialist when you need their help if you don't even have a basis of what your health looks like? Same with your finances. You got to have a foundation, and then you can always build upon it and go see specialists for different resources.
What is your sort of favorite area to focus on? So like when you're working with somebody on their plan, you get excited about.
Oh, I am a big tax nerd.
Okay.
Yeah. I help our current clients prepare their income tax returns every year, but I am so excited about helping people pay their fair share to the IRS and nothing beyond that.
Right.
So no, if you're in your 20s and you come to see me, or if you're in your 80s and you come to see me, I'm always forecasting the future, and especially helping if you're in your 80s to make sure that the IRS is not going to be your biggest beneficiary in the future. But I hyper focus in on that tax situation, no matter where you are in your life, and make sure that you're covered tax wise, because there's a lot of misinformation in the world when it comes to taxation. So yeah, if you ever can't sleep, anyone can always call me and I'll talk tax to them and put them to bed in the middle of the night, because it can be a pretty boring topic, but I happen to actually really love it.
Well, and it's constantly evolving. Like I know some new registration rules came out this year for businesses. And if people aren't aware of that, there's penalties and all these consequences to that. And if you're an ordinary person with maybe a traditional accountant, they may or may not know.
Yeah.
Right. And that has consequence for you. So you want to be with somebody that is aware of these changes, paying attention to these changes, and, making sure that you're being taken care of.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of government agencies out there that let things slide. The IRS is not one of them. So you always have to make sure you're doing your due diligence and you're working with someone who can help educate you and prepare you to be, prepared for those changes, because I have quite a few clients that do own small businesses and whatnot. And we've had a lot of conversations recently, because I always want to make sure that they're not going to subject themselves to any penalties that they're not even aware of. And it's not, malicious.
It's literally, yeah. And the one that just came out, it's literally like submitting a document, and it's not like some cumbersome, process for someone to do it. It's just a question of if they know or not.
Yeah, exactly.
So my own accountant, who I really love, was talking about how he believes that AI is going to be doing a lot of tax returns in the future. How is that looking now? Is it look good when people do that? I mean, is it coming out the same as yours, or is it not?
So our tax software we use actually does have an AI program in it, and I don't implement it because I don't know, I'm too much of a control freak. But for grins last year, I put one tax return through the AI, and they don't file it or anything, but they prepare it. And then I looked at it and it was spot on.
Okay.
I actually think sometimes human beings make more mistakes than technology. But that being said, the human being had to set up the technology, so it has to be set up properly from the get-go.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So when I was thinking about that, I was thinking that too. I mean, like, that's only as good as the information you put into it.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you don't know what information to put into it, you're still going to come out not for the better.
Yeah.
And anyway, he was saying to me, like, as far as accounting goes, the future of accounting is tax planning. It is planning for your future. It is business planning. It is long-term care insurance, which we should probably talk about next.
Oh, absolutely, because none of us are immune to that. The new statistic out there is that 7 out of 10 of us are going to need long-term care in the future, even just one day. And if you're one of those 3 out of 10, which I know everyone I work with is like, I'm going to be one of those 3 out of 10. We all want to be one of those 3 out of 10 that doesn't actually need it. If you're not going to need it, you're going to love someone who needs it, and you're going to be helping to care for them in long-term care. So none of us are going to be immune to it in the future. because we are living longer. And there are a lot of things you can do to live healthier longer. Um, but that being said, you probably need to have some plan in place if you do need long-term care, because every single person, it's like a fingerprint. Everyone's different, and their idea of what they want for care is different. So if you want to spend down your assets and go into a Medicaid facility, great. You can plan for that. If you want someone to come in with home health care, you're going to need to have coverage of some kind to cover that. So it can be like a life insurance policy that can pay down your death benefit while you're living to cover your care needs. And that could be for someone to come into your home or for you to go into a facility. Or you'll do what we call self-care or self-coverage, and self-fund it with your own funds. But I mean, I'm all about keeping the money in the family. So if you can offset with a little bit of expense on the front end, and have long-term care coverage with life insurance that stays in the family and is tax-free no matter what, whether you spend it while you're alive and you need care, or when you're gone and it goes to your beneficiaries without tax, I think that happens to be a great plan. Or we have a lot of clients that say, you know what, I'm going to have my family step in and take care of me, which is a beautiful sentiment.
But you never know.
No. And, my sister is a nurse. She's a pediatric oncology nurse, and she's 2.5 years older than me. If I'm in the point in time in my life that I need long-term care, do you think someone 2.5 years older than me that has a nursing skill set is going to step in and take care of me? Probably not. And if I have kids in the future, are they going to be able to step in and take care of me? Probably not, because they're going to have a full-time job or whatever else. We all have lives and things happen. So you can't just kind of fly by the seat of your pants with that one. You got to have a plan in place, because especially if you're at the point in time that you need care because of mental health reasons.
That's what I was going to say. Well, I was even going to say, when you look at the family's going to take care of me, that's all well and good if you can predict the future on what health looks like for you.
Oh yeah.
Because there's a million things that your family can't, or they're going to be incapable of properly taking care of you. So then you still need a plan.
Oh yeah. I mean, I gladly go and help out with my mom's parents when they need it, but I don't even know how to properly lift Grammy without hurting myself, and there are so many layers to it. It's like you need the right skill set to come in and step in and help. But if you're at the point in time that you need long-term care and you don't have a plan in place, especially if you need care because you have Alzheimer's or dementia, you should have had a conversation with someone in the past so that they know what kind of care you want, because we're all human beings. We deserve to be respected and have access to and control over the type of care that we're going to have in the future. So,
then you
talk about it with someone.
You get to actually make those decisions as opposed to your family making those decisions for you.
Yeah.
You're like, nope, I've already thought this through. This is, and I'm not one that's like terrified of being in a long-term care facility. There's the levels that are available now are unbelievable. I mean, you can just be in a home on the property with access to fast care.
Yeah.
I mean, or you can be in an Alzheimer's unit where you actually need memory care, and it's, and then everything in between. And to me, that's amazing. And I don't know if it's our generation. I'm less fearful of that than maybe my parents, or maybe even more so than my grandparents.
Oh, absolutely.
They were terrified of that.
Well, my grandparents that are in care fought it for so long, and I'm like, can I join you and have someone make my meals every night and have a gym on site? And like, you even have a beauty shop on site. That sounds amazing. And they're like, we don't want to be here,
That's so funny to me too, because at work, some of the gals and I have a running joke. I'll be like, it's time to check me in somewhere. Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah, exactly.
This was a stressful day. Yeah.
I know, right? I mean, but seriously, some of these facilities are like a spa, and that's today. In the future,
yeah,
I'm sure they're only going to get better.
Right. Well, and in some ways they'll have to, because there'll be less people in. There's a lot of facilities now, and as I'm aging, I'm a little ahead of you. I expect they're going to have to come up with ways to compete with each other.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore the quality should actually improve and not get worse. And, cross my fingers that I'm right about that. We'll see.
Yeah,
But, yeah.
Like everything, we have to evolve and change.
Yeah, exactly. So when I look at wellness, I try to think of all the elements of wellness that I can affect. I can definitely affect what I'm eating.
Absolutely.
I can choose my job somewhat, to a certain degree. I can control my stress somewhat to a certain degree. But I think a lot of people are flying by the seat of their pants on their finances. And that is a part of health in the sense that, just like you were saying, having a plan versus not having a plan,
Of course.
being prepared for an emergency versus not being prepared. You were talking about like having a crisis and your cortisol. Like, talk about that for a second.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So, I am one of the people that has to have unfortunate conversations quite a bit with, clients or prospects alike. And I had a client recently whose spouse, right before Christmas, they were unresponsive and had to go to the hospital, and they were in a coma for a couple weeks. And they had never talked through finances prior to that. They didn't know any of his passwords. They didn't know how to pay his bills. And I cannot even express to you the amount of stress that that poor woman was under trying to figure it all out. And luckily, we were able to step in and help. And, unfortunately, he did pass away, but she figured out in that moment that had they taken a half hour to plan prior to that, she wouldn't have had to go through that layer of stress when you're in the most dire situation in your entire life. And you talked about being in control. We can't control everything in our lives, and we totally get that. I can't control the stock market, but I can control if I'm going to have something that is safe behind the stock market in my portfolio too as well. I can't control everyone else's financial decisions in my life, but I can control my own. And it only takes a little bit of work to put that on paper. But I know that it's very stressful to get to that point in time. It is so much more stressful when you're in the moment and you need the help, because think about being in survival mode. We all have fight or flight, and I like to think I'm the person that's going to fight. Every once in a while, I freeze up, because I'm a human being.
Right.
God forbid something happens to my husband. If we wouldn't have gone through all of the planning and, execution that we have together, being a nerdy, numbers cruncher myself and married to an engineer, I don't even know what I would do, because I probably would just be stuck in survival mode, and I would have I'd be filled with cortisol. I'd gain weight back. I would be a mess if I didn't have a plan in place if something were to happen to one of the two of us.
Right. And just the level of stress you're reducing in an already stressful situation it's critical. It's critical. And then on that front, though, even though you establish a plan, then you have to check in on it so often.
Absolutely.
Is there like a timeline that you like to follow? Like, okay, we've got this plan in place. Now we want to check in. How often?
I check in with my clients at least once a year. And that's for the people who are like, set it, forget it, I never want to talk about it again. Well, guess what? You have to talk to me at least once a year.
Yeah.
But you know what? Life changes on a daily basis. So I even get phone calls like, hey, my car broke down. I need a new car. What should I do? And we check in and we, kick the wheels again then. But I would say probably quarterly, depending upon what's happening in your life and if you're in your working years versus retirement, where things can slow down a little bit. Or pick up right away and then slow down a little bit, because some people, when they retire, are busier than when they were working, depending upon what you want to do in the future. But I would say, on average, you should be checking, kicking the tires at least once a year.
And what about like the big assessments, like changing your will? Like, how often are you looking at that?
Well, you have to have a foundation to begin with. And then as life changes, so say you have family members enter the equation or exit the equation, or something drastically changes with your finances, those decisions need to be made then too.
Okay. So big life changes.
A common issue I come across on that is a lot of people forget to redo their beneficiaries when they lose spouses or children or parents or And we focus on legacy planning too, because it's not just about leaving money behind. You want to leave who you are as a human behind. And I think that ties into longevity too. Like, if you live a beautiful life and you make an impact on the people in your lives, that impact is going to be around a lot longer than your body will.
Yeah, exactly.
So leave that legacy behind and really focus on, what makes you tick as a human. Make sure the next few generations know about that and, can keep your memory alive when you're gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think these are amazing topics.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that we kind of went through and hit on things that, in a wellness world, maybe you wouldn't think about money, but money is important and it does have an effect on your health and your brain and your body. I mean, when you're in high cortisol crazy, like, it's affecting your heartbeat and your breathing and your every part of you, your sleep. And so knowing that you have a structure in place and you have a plan and you know what you're doing and you're looking at all the elements is huge. And also knowing that you don't have to dive in head first and do all of this at one time, that you can baby step your way in and bite the elephant in small pieces, then that is tremendous. And I do think Ricken does an amazing job with their clients. Plus, you know what? They give their clients pies every year.
Oh yeah, we do. That might not help with your cortisol, but whatever.
I mean, that's
who doesn't get a little bit of stress relief with a homemade salted caramel cinnamon crumb apple pie?
I mean, it is so cool. I think that's one of the coolest things I've ever heard. I'm like, that is personal touch. That's a level of personal touch you don't see everywhere.
Oh yeah, I like to say we don't serve breadsticks, but when you're with me, you're my family,
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, thanks for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
And it was a wealth of information that I hope people benefit from. And if you want more information about Ricken Financial, we will link it in the show notes. We also hope that you will like and follow and share our podcast. And maybe a review would be amazing. We're really small. We're just, trying to get our feet wet. We're trying to grow. And we're hoping that you'll help us do that by sharing the information. And once again, thank you for joining us on Beyond the Mirror.
We want to make a quick but important disclosure. The information and advice shared in this podcast are intended to provide general knowledge and understanding about wellness and health-related subjects. They are not intended to replace professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or qualified health provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment, and before undertaking a new health regimen. Remember, your health is your responsibility, and it's always best to consult with a healthcare professional.